What's going on, everyone, and welcome to Rondo episode 15. And Josh, this will be the last episode for the year. So Merry Christmas in advance, and also happy birthday for the other day.
Just rolling it all into one. Yes,
Yeah.
Merry Christmas, and many happy returns on your impending nuptials.
Yes, I don't know why you said impending like that. It was a bit spooky.
Nuptials is also kind of a creepy word.
Both words are creepy.
Weird choices, but I'm happy for you.
How was Canberra? You were away again the last episode. We
Uh-huh.
had Q from Civil FC who ably filled in for you. We talked about some interesting things, and one question that I want to... You know what? I'll open the show with this.
Okay.
We talked about Romelu Lukaku and his role at Chelsea, and obviously Chelsea on a massive run, obviously a few blips recently. And I asked him whether he thought Lukaku made Chelsea better or worse as a team. And in almost the same vein that we talk about Cristiano Ronaldo at Manchester United, whether he alters the way they play, changes their style, impedes, the rhythm. I'm actually interested to know your thoughts. After I spoke with Q, he thought, that Lukaku actually made Chelsea worse as a team. Where do you stand on his role at Stamford Bridge?
Well, it's sort of the fundamental question of modern tactics since Guardiola started playing false nines is a centre forward worth the trade-off? And in Lukaku's case, I would argue that he's actually been played out of position for most of his career. Because just the sneaky thing about Romelu Lukaku, even though he looks for all the world like a big burly target man, is he's actually really effective when he's running at defenders and running at goal. And his best match for Belgium came against Brazil, in my opinion, in the quarterfinals of the 2018 World Cup, where he was played sort of on the right-hand side of a front three.
And
cutting in, but mostly just in more open spaces and dribbling.
Yeah.
And that's why he's always so devastating, and Belgium, by extension, are so devastating on the counter-attack. When, they've got a player like Dries Mertens, who has always killed it at club level, especially for Napoli. His best years were in a false nine role for Napoli. But he's always relegated to the wing for Belgium and is never quite as effective.
Yeah.
So I've always wondered, why don't they just switch those two players? And I think that'd be an infinitely better side. But I guess it takes a brave manager to turn to Romelu Lukaku, who scored so many goals in his career, and say, you're playing on the wing.
Yeah.
That's what I think Thomas Tuchel should do, though. I really do. In this front three, I don't think he should necessarily be competing for the central striker role, but rather for the inside right forward with, the likes of Ziyech and so forth, because I think he offers a lot in that position. And although, the knock on him at United was always his first touch, Conte worked with him a lot at Inter on that. He has improved in that regard with balls to feet, but he's still better facing goal. And that's why he worked well in a two-striker system that was primarily counter-attacking at Inter. And that's why at Chelsea, I think he's sometimes limits their play and makes them a little bit one-dimensional. So I reckon there's a way to incorporate him to maximise his strengths and also the team.
So talk people through the success at Inter then. You talked about that two-striker system. What did that look like in terms of where he was positionally on the pitch that allowed him to run at defences?
So when you're playing with one centre forward, they kind of have to stay in the one spot a lot of the time because they have to be a focal point, because you always need somebody who can be in the box to finish in the 6-yard box. So if your starting position is too deep, then you end up crossing the ball across the face of goal and no one's there to finish it.
Yep.
And you also need somebody who's playing on the last man to push the opposition defense backwards and give them a reason not to play so high that they constrict your midfield play.
Yeah.
So if you're playing with two centre forwards, as he did with Martinez primarily at Inter, you can always have one dropping short and one stretching the defence and running in behind.
Yeah.
And that worked really well because Lukaku was able to do a little bit of everything. He just didn't have to just play target man. He could also run off the shoulder. He could also drop deep, pick up the ball, turn and dribble. And Antonio Conte, there's stories of him just firing balls like himself, not just with the coaching staff, but him just kicking balls at Lukaku and getting him to control them, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty low-tech way to,
I mean, it
improve
worked.
your first touch, but it seems to have worked. And he's also... he also, I think, at Inter cut a little bit of weight and like a bit of muscle, because I think he just put on too much muscle at United.
Yeah.
And
Big boy.
yeah, he was a big lad, and
Yeah.
I don't think that helped his mobility. Sometimes
Yes.
players can go too far with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And
You know all
slimming
about
down.
that, right?
Yeah, of course. I just that's why I don't go to the gym ever, because I just don't want
Too
to
big.
impede my mobility.
Yeah, that's right.
Otherwise,
That's right. That's
I
right.
get caught on doorways.
It's tough. It's tough. And so, what then at Chelsea? What do you think that optimum front three would look like for Thomas Tuchel, and does Lukaku have a role in that?
It's difficult because they're also kind of interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I still don't think the best front three contains Timo Werner, because he's just unreliable.
Interestingly, though, I did a poll after the episode with Q, and I said Lukaku or Werner, and Werner got about 80% of the votes.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go. I mean, he's been playing well recently, but I still don't trust him in big games. I just think he's a bit flaky.
Yeah.
For me, it would be Lukaku on the right,
Mm-hmm.
Havertz as the sort of false nine.
Yes.
Because I think that's his best position, because he's got the first touch and the skill to be able to incorporate players with his back to goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then the left inside forward position could be anyone, really. Probably Mason Mount, actually.
Yeah.
I think he's been playing really well under Tuchel since he
Yeah.
took over, because his off the ball movement is so good. And then once Havertz drops in, it essentially becomes two strikers, because Mount is always running in behind as well.
Yeah.
He's always stretching defenses with those off the ball runs. So it essentially becomes a 3-4-1-2 once the central striker becomes the false nine, if you know what I mean. It kind of flips. The front three flips. So that's probably what it would look like for me. But they've got a lot of good players competing for those positions in Hudson-Odoi and Pulisic and Ziyech and Werner. And there's a lot of options. And I think that's part of the problem for Chelsea at the moment, is they don't quite know what the best team is. And the other thing is they are a little bit more cautious than Man City and Liverpool in their play. They don't usually risk as much. Yes, they've racked up scorelines against bottom teams, but in the big games, they usually play a little bit more conservatively. And you look at things like XG tables, they're actually below City and Liverpool, despite their hot start to the season. And now we're seeing that reflected in the table finally. So I wonder if that's catching up to them a little bit. They tend to concede more shots than City and Liverpool, because they play a little bit deeper with their defensive line, and that invites a little bit more pressure.
Yeah.
Then again, the trade-off for City and Liverpool, who play such high-octane, high lines, is when they do concede chances, they tend to be really high-quality chances, because it's when everything breaks down, someone gets in behind. But their goalkeepers barely face any shots. So there's your trade-off, and that's the two schools of thought, I suppose, and that's where the title will be won and lost.
Excuse me. And I think the point of having an abundance of talent and abundance of choice also doesn't help. I watched Frank Lampard's interview with Gary Neville on The Overlap, and he talked about when they were bringing all this talent in and how to balance it and negotiate that. But moving on to a club that doesn't have that much choice, Barcelona and your boy Xavi Hernandez. Knocked out of the Champions League at the time of recording this morning. They're playing Europa League. You were very critical of the hiring of Xavi Hernandez. And
I had mixed feelings.
Mixed feelings. I don't put words in your mouth. I never do that. So, you had mixed feelings about Xavi Hernandez, and we've spoken plenty about this use of nostalgia by clubs bringing back former players, legendary players, right, to become coaches. Yep. How would you review Xavi's reign so far, though short, but obviously out of the Champions League, and I think, are they 16 points behind Real Madrid or something in the table?
They're a long way off. Look, Xavi's been dealt a losing hand. To get knocked out of the Champions League in this fashion is humiliating, but, Koeman made the bed and now he's sleeping in it.
Yeah. Yep.
If Koeman was getting the same results as Xavi is, then I think there'd be a lot more pressure, but because it's a new hire, people are a little bit more forgiving, although the local press in Spain are pretty savage.
Yep.
I don't know if you've seen El Chiringuito lately, but it's safe to say there weren't many level heads on the panel when Barcelona got knocked out this morning. But having to win away to Bayern Munich to progress was always a nightmare.
Tough task.
So they needed to win one of the earlier games and they didn't. I think Barcelona are still a little bit deluded. It was actually a topic they got into on El Chiringuito, which not always the best analysis show. As you know, this is the same one where it was the tic-tac for Mbappe to Real Madrid and so forth.
Yeah.
But one of the presenters did make the point that people are still deluded about, oh, maybe we'll sign Erling Haaland, maybe we'll get Ferran Torres even from City or something. Like, who's going to go there when they're playing in the Europa League?
Yeah.
I still think the Barcelona name holds a lot of prestige, and I can anticipate them recovering a little bit towards the back end of the season. But post-Messi, with a huge financial crisis, I don't think anyone expects Xavi to turn it around immediately when he's relying on basically a lot of youth team players.
And all big clubs, and I think, go through a cycle, right, of success and then rebuilding, success and rebuilding. You look at Liverpool as a prime example of went through a period where they were rebuilding and now obviously reaping the rewards of that. United, arguably, in the period of still rebuilding. And do you think Barcelona are there because it's been a natural progression of their successes in the early 2000s with those Champions League wins and those amazing squads? Or has it been accelerated because of the financial crisis, which we've covered before?
Yeah, I don't think this is a natural cycle. I mean, it's never a natural cycle in Spain. If you don't win the title, it's a crisis. But Barcelona have dipped beyond that now into such heavy debt. And, the recent La Liga changes to, salary caps and so forth. Basically means Barcelona can't sign anybody.
Yep.
So this is an extreme situation. I'm actually reading a book at the moment about Barcelona. And one thing that did strike me, and maybe this is a nice departure from my usual anti-Ronaldo bias, but it doesn't strike me that Lionel Messi was a particularly good leader there. Some of the things I'm reading in this book, which is by Simon Cooper.
This is from Yaz. This handshake is from Yaz.
Some of the things I'm reading in this book seems to suggest that Lionel Messi might be the most aggressive celebrity in the world. He basically led by not saying anything, and then everyone is forced to guess what his opinion might be and then act accordingly.
Jeez.
And he kept everyone on tenterhooks by basically having a clause in his contract that his deal basically expired every year unless they paid him more money. So
what you're saying is Lionel Messi is the cause of Barcelona's financial downfall?
Not the cause, but he definitely didn't help. Like, you see the amount of money that they paid him, and that's at least part of the reason why they are in this mess now. So, the burden of having Lionel Messi, the global phenomenon and, greatest player ever or whatever, at your club, I think has left a gaping hole in his absence, and he's taken a lot of the money with him.
Yeah. And do you reckon the return of Xavi as coach, and obviously the promotion of all these La Masia products now, a return to more of the roots that built their success in the first place? Do you think that this is something that they'll need to give time with the likes of Pedri and Gavi and all them coming through? Can they have a realistic expectation of trophy success in the next few years, or is it a matter of letting them blood these young talents into, for future success?
In the next few years, I'm not sure what will happen. It depends how they manage the finances and how much they're able to get La Liga to soften on the hardline stance of basically being able to sign no one. Because the truth of the matter is, La Masia are always a core part of the Barcelona identity, and a lot of those products did go on to great things. Xavi being one of them, Iniesta, Puyol, etc., etc., etc. But they were always able to supplement that by buying the best player in the world. They bought Ronaldinho for an enormous sum of money at the time from PSG. They bought Thierry Henry at his peak from Arsenal. They bought Samuel Eto'o. They bought Ibrahimovic, even though that didn't work out, but that was a huge chunk of money. Even the players who excelled in other teams in Spain, like Jordi Alba, who himself was a Barcelona youth player, but he went away to Valencia, and then they had to spend a lot of money to bring him back.
Fabregas.
Yep.
PK?
PK, the same journey. And then players like Dani Alves, who played for, the next tier down of clubs in Spain, in Sevilla, but they were able to afford him.
Who wore flip-flops to his return?
Well, hey, he's playing for free, so he's literally playing for the minimum wage that a Spanish club is legally allowed to offer somebody. That's the reason they're able to sign him. So.
Yeah. Incredible. It'll be
so you would wear flip-flops if you weren't getting paid, right?
Yeah, look, fair enough.
I mean, you wear flip-flops when you are getting paid.
Socks and slides. I wear them to work, wear them to church. My rule is be comfortable first, you know what I'm saying? So don't play games with me. Well, moving on from Barcelona, and it'll be interesting to see how they develop and whether, success comes back to the club in the near future. But a team that we talk about a lot, that is always teasing us with the cusp of returning to success and always letting us down inevitably. Manchester United. I've been wanting to talk to you. You've been away, and when Ralf Rangnick signed, I was like, Josh is gonna have a lot to say about this. And I did my reading on Ralf Rangnick. I read a bunch of articles on The Athletic. I watched some videos about his coaching philosophy. And, how he was the leader in the terms of the next wave of German coaches like Tuchel and Klopp and all them, and his work with the Red Bull Group and all that. What are your initial thoughts, having seen, I think, 2 games now of Ralf? This morning against Young Boys was a shambles. Nemanja Matic had a horror show. But that game that we played against in the Premier League...
Crystal Palace
I thought it looked good. The pressing looked coordinated. The team looked like they were on the same page.
I thought Ronaldo was going to get taken off on a stretcher. He looked so tired.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, trying to impress the new boss.
And
props.
Fred, right foot outside the box, just goes to show maybe he's got them pulling in the same direction.
I think he said afterwards, and Ralf likes his little jokes in the press conference. He said, I didn't know he had a right foot, Fred. I had to check to see if, it had been deflected.
Yeah.
I know he could shoot with his right, but, the Red Fred redemption arc,
It's a beautiful thing, and it was amazing to see them all pressing, coordinate. They looked like they knew what they were doing and what was expected, which for me is an exciting prospect to watch.
I saw a funny tweet. It was some discussion about whether Fred and namely McTominay would be dropped under the new manager.
Yeah.
And someone responded saying, "Are you kidding? McTominay is a 6'4" Aryan monster. Run all day. Of course he's going to love him." But look, I think these players with a little bit more specific instruction could do a lot better than they are doing. I think we're going to see a lift.
And we did mention that Fred is not a shit player, right?
No.
I know, and the joke is that he's terrible and whatever, but we did make a mention in previous episodes that sometimes having a coach that's able to coach those things out of you, like you mentioned with Lukaku and Conte with the first touch, I mean, that's the role of a coach, right?
Well, for Fred, it's just decision making, and he always has 1 or 2 moments in a game where he does something crazy. He's usually good for 80% of the game, and then it's the 20% that you remember. And maybe a good coach will be able to make him more consistent and give him more specific instructions when he has the ball or in defensive situations so that he always knows what to do. And there was one thing that was really frustrating me during the Valencia game when Carrick was in charge, that Fred and McTominay wouldn't press at the same time. And that was part of the Solskjaer system, I guess, that they couldn't leave the center of the park unguarded.
Yep.
So it actually impeded them because the opposition always had a way out.
Yep.
So they weren't brave enough to commit. And we actually saw that change. It's not a function of the players, but it's a function of the coaching and the instructions. We saw that change under Rangnick, and both McTominay and Fred were able to press at the same time. And obviously, that's riskier, but it's a risk-reward equation.
Yeah.
And that's what Ralf Rangnick has built his career on.
Yeah.
Is that idea that, risking playing your players high up the park will reap rewards in terms of...
No, I'm not calling anyone.
I thought you were calling
No, I'm not calling anyone. I have
reap rewards in terms of the chances you generate off the turnovers. So.
Yeah, and I had saved just some stats regarding his first.
Okay, all right.
And I want to reel off to you. Sorry, I wasn't going to call. I know that I've done that before, which, to be fair, was pretty fun.
Yeah,
when I did
it was
call.
funny. Yeah. I just don't want you reusing your material.
No. So in that first game in the Premier League, it was the first clean sheet at home since April. It was the first time we'd won possession 12 times in the final third since Sir Alex left. Most passes in the final third this season, 77. Most touches in opposition box and passes into penalty area this season, and more shots in the first 30 minutes than the entire game against Watford. Definitely a step up in the level of coaching.
Yeah.
It's clear.
I think there's also a bit of a new manager bounce there,
Of
and all
course.
these players in a new era with all this talk about his philosophies and which players will fit and which won't. It's interesting that he decided to play 2 up front. That's what they've played at Leipzig for years and years. The sort of 4-2-2-2,
Yep.
very narrow 4-4-2, with Sancho and Fernandes basically playing similar roles. You think of one as a winger and one as a playmaker, but they're both playmakers, and I like that that's being recognised in this shape. And then it gives you a chance to play one of the quick forwards up front in an out-and-out striking role, whereas usually the likes of Martial, Rashford and Greenwood are usually relegated to the wing when Ronaldo's playing up there. So I think it's a good system for United. And, I don't think this level is necessarily going to be maintained for the rest of the season because it just takes a physical toll on players.
Yes,
and
for sure.
The new manager bounce and that like willingness to run hard in the first game, might wane in fixtures coming up. So there'll need to be a bit of rotation there. But I'm generally pretty positive about what I saw. And I think Rangnick is a good appointment from a club that has made a lot of bad decisions over the past decade.
And we'll end on this. He's got a 6-month contract as interim manager before he moves into what has been vaguely described as a consultancy role for 2 years. This is a 2-part question for you. If these 6 months go well, and I think success looks like finishing top 4, would you want to see United stick with Ralf Rangnick on a longer term contract? Or would you suggest going with plan A all along, which was his 6 months, and then be more involved in behind the scenes and get a new coach in?
United have made mistakes in appointing caretaker managers as permanent managers
Yeah.
before, but I think Rangnick falls into an entirely different category based on his experience. Look, if he's successful in the role, I don't think there's any reason why he shouldn't continue coaching other than whether he wants to or not. He doesn't seem to want to do that for a long time. So if he's allowed to make the next appointment and oversee the transition and appoint someone who he knows, who he rates as a coach. Who knows? It might be Ralf Hasenhüttl or someone like that. He's coached with, he's mentored before. Then I don't see a problem with that at all. As long as there is coherence and consistency in approach. Because United have vacillated pretty wildly from manager to manager. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was a massive departure from Mourinho, who in turn was a massive departure from Louis van Gaal's ideas, who was completely different to David Moyes. So, they've had a lot of inconsistency in the dugout. And they haven't been able to build up a long-term plan because they've never had a proper football department. So if Rangnick can essentially become the football department, the director of football, even if that's not his formal title, if that's the responsibility that he holds, I'm happy with that outcome.
And are they kicking themselves with David Moyes, looking at what he's doing at West Ham? Should they have stuck it out with him?
No, I don't think so. I think he was pretty broken by the Manchester United experience. And I don't think he was ever going to succeed there. I don't think he needed maybe a bit of time out from the game. I also don't think the West Ham experience is necessarily applicable to top clubs. That's why I always found it bizarre when Sam Allardyce used to say, "Oh, give me 50 million, I'll win the league," or whatever. Because his style of play is designed for underdog teams, and West Ham's is as well. And I think they're hitting the limit of where that can get you. Basically excelling off set pieces, being quite disciplined, very good on the counter attack. A whole bunch of really fast athletic players. And, West Ham's not a small club either. They've spent a lot on transfers. They've got an outrageous stadium deal, which should make them the envy of clubs in England. And, there's been quite good players who haven't succeeded there under Moyes, like Haller and
who's killing
in the Champions League for a team that doesn't rely on that outrageous athleticism up front. I think they're wasting Nikola Vlasic at the moment, who's a great player and should be playing somewhere where he'll start every week and tear it up, but he doesn't seem to fit into the West Ham ethos so far. So I don't think it necessarily applies to the traditional big clubs. I think Moyes is basically peaking right now with what he can do, and good on him, because West Ham are showing that you can knock off the big teams with a very well-drilled game plan. And, no slouches in the money department themselves, of course, but it adds a little bit of variety to the league when,
which is great, which is awesome to watch.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that Chelsea game was fantastic. And they make games a little bit chaotic, which I quite enjoy, because that's the fun of watching the Premier League in the middle of the night. It needs to keep you awake somehow, and it's a real ding dong battle, if you like. It's like Rock'em Sock'em Robots. It's just ridiculous.
Which is good. Well, look, and usually this time in the episode we do our Premier League picks, but you've been away. We've had.
What are we going to do? Pick 30 matches?
We can't pick 30 matches in a row.
I think it might be more than that. It's going to be.
It's a lot, because I was like, we can just plan it out and see, and then I was like, there's match weeks every 3 days or something.
I mean, that's why the managers keep talking about a winter break. These players are crazy. Like, they're just absolutely slaughtered over Christmas.
And so because the players can't take a winter break, we're taking a summer break. And we're not going to do any picks until we get back in Jan.
Okay.
But I have a surprise for you.
Ooh.
The episode after this next week is going to be a Christmas quiz episode. I found a Guardian football soccer Christmas quiz,
Oh, there you
which
go.
we'll record after this. And that will tie out the year for us.
Can't wait.
Yeah, so there's no points on the line for the picks or whatever. I think I've tried.
It's not in the Christmas spirit.
Yeah. So we'll do that. But thank you all for watching, for being a part of the Rondo, Josh. It's been pretty good.
Yeah, been good fun.
Yeah. So I'll see you at my wedding, and then in 2022.
I'll see you in the quiz.